Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room and welcome to a new project. Now that I have finished Daniel Deronda and the Samantha American Girl cloak, and I've also finished the show that I was in, Into the Woods, I have a little bit more time on my hands and I am ready to delve into another big project. Now I know originally a couple of months ago I said that I was planning to do a wool winter coat next, but it is now March. So the winter weather is going away. There's only probably going to be another half a month, if that I need a coat at all. So that coat is going to get pushed to sometime later, maybe next year, maybe the fall, something like that. And instead, I'm going to be starting another historical project. And I am keeping in the same kind of era that I was just working in with Daniel Deronda, and we are going to do a bustle gown. Now, this is no ordinary bustle gown that we are doing today. This is something that has been on my to-do list for probably as long as Daniel Deronda, maybe even longer. Like, it's been on my to-do list for ages. And that is this dress right here, this fashion plate. I just fell in love with it the first time that I saw it. And I also kind of fell in love with it when I saw the fabric for it. So this fabric right here, I have had this for a really long time. You can see this sort of like subtle stripe in it. This is actually, I believe it's a dupioni. It does have slubs, but because of the stripes, I feel like the slubs in this dupioni, they really don't show up. And I found this fabric, I don't even know how many years ago, at Luxury Fabrics in the LA Fabric District. And when I found it, it was on a super sale. I don't even remember what I paid for this, but I think it was like $5 or $6 a yard. Like, it was ridiculously cheap. And it is silk. I mean, they just have sometimes some of the best prices there. So I found this fabric and I was looking through my fashion plates to see, like, well, could I make anything out of this sort of a subtle stripe gradient fabric? And this fashion plate came up and it was like a match made in heaven. And so I knew that this dress had to be. And at the time I bought another solid fabric to go with it, which looked just like this, but it wasn't actually this fabric, because I wound up using that other fabric for my fairy godmother bustle that I made back in 2019. So that's how long ago I have had this on my to-do list. It's been at least since 2018 that I've even had the fabric. So anyway, I used up that fabric, but then this fashion plate was still eating at me and I still had this fabric. So I knew that I'd have to get more. So I got more, and now it's finally time to make this dress. Now, I fully realize that natural form gowns are really impractical, particularly because I live in the Pacific Northwest, land of wet and mud and all of that, and natural form gowns tend to have humongous trains. So as part of this project, I am going to have to figure out some way to rig up the train. They actually did at the time have like skirt hook train holders that would lift up the train. So, I mean, if I can, maybe I can get my hands on an antique one or something just similar to act in that place, because I want to wear this dress. Now, if all goes as planned, I will finish this dress in time for the Victorian Festival at the end of April. I don't know if that's actually going to be possible. I know that this is going to take a long time. I mean, obviously there are so many embellishments on this dress. The natural form era in particular, they went crazy. More is more is more is more. I mean, they just absolutely, you want more on your dress? Yeah, throw that on your dress too. Oh yeah, add a longer train? Yeah, definitely. Ruffles? Oh sure. Pleats? Yeah. How about some extra trimming? Yeah, that was the natural form all over the place. They just absolutely love trimming. So I am fully aware that this is going to take me a long time. And I am fully aware that there are at least one or two other projects that will probably come up within the next couple of months too, that I will have to slot in within this project. So just as a heads up, you will be seeing a lot of videos on this probably, since it will take me a while, and then also some videos on other projects in the interim. But I'm very excited to start on this one. Now, with this project, I think that I'm going to be able to use a version of my go-to bodice pattern. I've talked about this bodice pattern a lot on my channel, but this was something that I created in a class back in 2016 that was actually offered by the Fifth Avenue Theater here in Seattle, and it has been such a valuable pattern. I use it for pretty much all of my Victorian everything. However, the natural form era, or at least this dress and many of the dresses in the natural form era, they really dropped that waist so far down. So the bodice really continued all the way down past the hips, and that's exactly what's going on here in this bodice as well. Now, of course, this is also a side view fashion plate, so there's only so much that I can really tell of what's going on in the front and what's going on in the back. There is some sort of decoration, something pleaty looking decoration that is coming down the shoulder here. There is also something that looks like lacing gap in the back, which is crazy because if you've been watching the Gilded Age, you also have probably been driven crazy by all of the back closures in their day gowns, because that was not a thing. I know that this gown does not close up the back. However, it may have some sort of a decorative panel in the center back, like over the rear end, basically over the bustle. So I'm gonna have to figure this out. This is gonna be a lot of just kind of making up the parts that I can't see. So it's going to be actually kind of interesting because although I am reproducing a fashion plate, there's just a lot of questions that this fashion plate leaves. So we are going to get started today with the bodice mock-up. My go-to bodice, I have also translated that into a longer princess seam bodice. I've used that for my stripy bustle gown, the only other natural form that I've done, which looks like this. And then I've also used it for Elsa back a couple years ago. So I'm going to take that pattern and give that a try first, I think, because it is more of the princess seam, because this is so long that it's almost treating it like a princess seam dress that is then has another skirt under it. So I'm going to start with that and try that out and see what I have to do to get that back lacing decoration thing working and what this sort of thing might be as well as far as decoration goes. But that's going to be the first thing. I think that my pattern is actually on fabric. If it is, that means I can just sew it together and try it on and see if that still works, which it should, because I've worn those dresses recently and they both still fit. But I know I'm gonna have some tweaking at least to do to the pattern, so we'll see how that works. First though, while I'm busy putting that pattern back together, or at least working on my mock-up, let's go over to Sponsor Rebecca for a little word from today's sponsor. Thank you, Sewing Rebecca. Sponsor Rebecca here, and today's video is kindly sponsored by Skillshare. If you've been around my channel at all, you have probably heard me talk about Skillshare before, but if you haven't yet heard of Skillshare, it is an online learning community for creative and curious people. On Skillshare, you can find thousands of inspiring classes on topics including web design, art, productivity, starting a side hustle, and even sewing. I've been trying to improve my photography skills, so I'm currently taking a class on editing photos entirely on my phone using the Adobe Lightroom app, which is great because I use my phone for all of my photography. This class, which is called Phone Photography, Edit Your Photos with Adobe Lightroom Mobile, is taught by Enrica Luzzi and is really helping me learn all of the different ways that I can tweak the photos I've taken in totally different ways than I can do with my phone's built-in image editor. And there are so many additional photography and editing classes available on Skillshare too. One of the things that I really like about Skillshare is that it's really easy to pause, rewind, or rewatch classes as often as you like, and you can save the classes that you want to take in the future to your profile so that you can come back and watch those classes later. And the great news is that the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so that you can explore your creativity. So use that link down below in the description to get your free trial of Skillshare today and unlock your limitless creative potential. And now, back to Sewing Rebecca. So before I even bother assembling the pattern from last time, which is right here, or at least partially right here, because I don't know where the fronts are, I I decided that I wanted to go ahead and draw out what I think the front and the back are going to look like. So I thought I'd kind of take you through my drawing here. So again, this is the fashion plate. I have printed it out just so that I can really see all of the details. This is also going to help me later when I go to look at scale, because I can look at like, okay, how big are the trims? How big are these pleats, etc., in comparison to like the total height, for example. And that will really help me figure out the scale just as it pertains to the fashion plate. One of the other things that I figured out in printing it out that I've just never noticed before looking at it on my phone is I'm pretty sure that these are actually tassel trims. So I don't currently own tassel trims. I have now ordered some on Amazon. We'll see if any of them work. But mine overall is slightly less pink than this, just because this actually, the other thing I've noticed printing it out is that it does have a little bit wider of a stripe. You can see it down here. You can't really see it so much up here. Here it looks very gradiented like mine. Here it looks more like that larger stripe. So anyway, I'm sticking with the fabric that I have, which looks more like this, but that means that there's less pink in the fabric overall. So I'm not exactly sure if like the full-on pink tassels here are going to be the best. I am still planning to do the pink bows, so hopefully that will kind of bring out more of the pink within that periwinkle stripy fabric that I have. But anyway, yeah, I'm pretty sure these are tassel trims. So that does save me from having to do a lot of pleating that I thought I was going to do, because originally I thought that these were like large fluted pleats, but really the only pleats on this I think are actually going to be these right along the bottom. They go all the way along the bottom of the underskirt. So the underskirt is this blue that you see here. So just like it'll start at the waist, and then the underskirt pretty much won't be seen in the front until you get down to the bottom, and it will be seen here in this sort of window, and then it will also be seen in all of the trims down here. The underskirt is the solid periwinkle, and all of these trims and stuff here. This one is sort of like a double ruffle where the ruffle is gathered in the middle, well, not quite in the middle, but in the middle of the strip, and then it is either piped or bound with this light pink. So you have the lower part of the ruffle here, the upper part of the ruffle there, and then the gathering is in between, and you have binding on top and bottom. And also this is light pink right here where it is gathered, so maybe that's stitched over. This one, I'm having a harder time figuring this out. It is either just like a ruched top with a ruffle underneath that's all connected, and this ruffle has the piping or trim or whatever on the bottom as well, or it is another large ruffle, and this part right here maybe is part of the ruffle. I think it's actually just that you don't see the top, like it's turned under and the top is gathered and then it's stitched down again and then it's the ruffle. I think that's what's going on, but it doesn't help us over here on the train either, but it's the same thing. So that is the underskirt, that is periwinkle. The sleeve is also periwinkle, as are the pleats on the sleeve. That's pretty much it for the periwinkle. I am going to do this as probably a separate periwinkle panel with the faux lacing over it. Instead of just like showing the skirt, I'm just going to keep that as like a piece of the back. It's going to be periwinkle. And then everything else is that stripy fabric that I have, other than where it's solid pink. So I decided I needed to try and figure out what the front would look like. So I've drawn out this. It honestly looks so simple that it almost makes me worried. So one thing that you might notice on here is that you can't really see a waist seam. Now it is possible that she is blocking a waist seam with her arm. Some dresses of this era, which I believe this to be about 1877 or 78, some dresses do have a seam right here and then continue below. However, it seems like the majority of those that have a seam have a different fabric in the skirt. This is the same continuous fabric in the skirt. So that's why I'm thinking that it's going to be seamless all the way from top to bottom. I've added in these buttons here because otherwise I don't know how this closes. We can't see any buttons, like as a little texture right up along the skirt here, but a lot of bodices in this era, most bodices that like have a center front seam, they closed with buttons. So we're going with buttons. We would not have a back closure because this is a day bodice. Thanks the Gilded Age, we don't have back closures on day bodices. So That's why this is just decorative. This is just like a fancy little panel. If they did that sometimes, it was kind of that sort of like Renaissance style that came in and was popular. They would put fake lacing. So that's why I'm going for all-in-one with buttons all the way up the front. Yes, I am going to kill myself because these are probably all going to be covered buttons. Good luck to me. Whew, that's going to be a lot of buttons. And then I believe that this is just like sort of a slightly gathered piece of the stripy silk. I'm not yet positive how that will work into the back, and I'm not positive just how gathered or how pleated it will be, but I think it's a little yoke like that. It will have a little fill-in in the neckline, probably just some sort of cotton, maybe like a white cotton. I've kind of written what the fabrics are on here, but with a little fold-over collar that was pretty popular, and then there will be the bow there on the bust as well. And we have 2 darts here in the front, and then that's it for shaping. And then there will be a seam like right here on the side, on each side. And this gets ruched up and pulled like we can see right here on the fashion plate. And then the sleeve wise, we can also see like the little pleated trim right here on the sleeve, but otherwise the sleeve is pretty basic and it is that periwinkle color. And then we can also see I drew in some of that ruching, pleating, ruffling detail, and I drew in part of the tassels right here. It's kind of tedious to draw a lot of tassels. So looking over at the back, speaking of tedious, I only did half of it because it's going to be the same thing over here. But basically what this is like a sash that has come around and kind of gotten looped together like a big old loose knot and falls there. I'm sure it is secured because otherwise it's going to come undone, but it's going to look like it's just sort of loosely tied there. And then here we have that faux lacing detail. So a lot of bodices in this era do have a center back panel that is a contrast, and sometimes it's a decorative type contrast as well. So that's what I'm going for here. It's a contrast panel with lacing, and it's kind of a spiral lacing look. You can kind of see that when you're looking right here too, how it's just zigging in one direction. So that's why I went with the spiral lacing here. And then we've got the tassels here. This part right here, this is the underskirt that we see. So this part is periwinkle. And then we have the stripy bit here, stripy bit that falls there. And then again, we've got the periwinkle right here and all of the ruching and pleating and all of that sort of stuff detail. This is gathered up to the sides, just like the front is gathered. Now, I don't know if that means it's actually going to be put together flat and then pulled up. That is one option, or they could be gathered separately. I'll have to play with that and see how it looks. And then we've got the bows on that part as well. So the one part that, again, I still am not really sure how it works is that it does look like on here that we have this being kind of ruched up and then ruched in the back, and then it just disappears. So if that's something that I can do, I will. I'm going to have to experiment. The other thing I'm going to have to experiment with is that my patterns normally have the wide fiddle back that was so popular at this time. So, you know, the back of the bodice basically goes to there, comes out to the shoulder, as opposed to this is going to be a small panel. And then I guess probably the seam will come in right here, because usually these have 3 pieces. So there's like a side back, and a center back. But the center back here is super narrow up at the top. So again, we're going to have to tweak these pattern pieces and figure out how that works. So that's why I haven't actually assembled the pattern yet. I really needed to figure out how does this actually go together first before I can pattern it out. So now I think I can go ahead and take these pattern pieces and my go-to bodice pattern that is crumpled right there, and I can take that and really make a mock-up. So I believe that the shaping over the rear end and hips on this will hopefully work. It may be a tiny bit small because of this one just seems a little bit bigger than my last one that was of this era. So that may need to get tweaked. And then I think it also may need to get a little bit lengthened. It's possible. We'll have to see about that. I can't remember exactly where it hit on the old one. I think, well, you know what? I think it was about there, because I think the other one came to here. So this, though, I think I might go ahead and mock up the entire front panel, even though that's like a waste of fabric, just because it's so long and I want to make sure that it fits like skirt wise. But all of that said, it would probably make more sense to do the skirt first, right? Because I need to figure out what volume is underneath this. And luckily the periwinkle only shows up otherwise on the sleeves and the little back bit. So I think I was going to do a bodice mock-up this week for you guys, but I think I might actually go ahead and start the skirt instead. So my go-to skirt pattern for this era does come from Period Costume 4 Stage and Screen. This is volume 2. Love, love, love this book. And we're on page 123 here. And honestly, these two skirts are pretty darn similar. I mean, this one has the train, which I do want for this. Maybe not quite that long of a train, but I do want a train. So I'm leaning towards skirt B. And that is this one right here. You can see I've used this a lot. I've written in this book all over. I mean, it's my book and I'm going to save those measurements for later, so might as well write in it. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with skirt B, and I don't mock up skirts. So that means I'm just going to go ahead and make sure all my math is correct on here and then cut it out of the silk so that I can start on this underskirt. And just like that, I have my skirt panels cut out. There are 6 total because the backs and the fronts are both on the fold, and then there's 2 of each of the side pieces. And these are ready to get serged at the sides and then seamed all together. And then I can start with the waistband and then hem and all of the decorations. I should have plenty of yardage left for the decorations, I hope. I've got about 3.6 yards at this point, plus extra scrappy bits, and I also did the sleeves out of that, but otherwise it's all the skirt trim. So I started in on serging the outsides of the silk taffeta skirt pieces, and as I was like 15 inches or so into one piece, it dawned on me, should this be flatlined? And so then I went and I pulled out some books. I pulled out Costume in Detail, I pulled out The Victorian Dressmaker, and I pulled out Patterns of Fashion. And I went through and I just looked at like what Isabella has done in The Victorian Dressmaker and also what the extents have looked like both in Costume in Detail and in Patterns of Fashion. And for the silk dresses, it seems like it is really completely mixed. Sometimes they were fully flatlined, and sometimes they were lined like with just down to like a hip area or like a really deep hem facing. And so I'm really torn on what to do because I was not planning on lining this. And it's been a while since I've made a silk bustle era gown. And so the other part was that I went into my closet to look at what I've done before, thinking, I don't normally line my bustle gowns, so like, why would I line this one? But apparently I do normally line my bustle gowns. As I mentioned, it has been a really, really long time since I made one out of silk. Like, I think we're talking probably the Fairy Godmother bustle and also the Natural Form gala gown. Both of those were 2019, like the first half of 2019. So it's been like 3 years since I've made a silk bustle gown. And I thought that both of those were not lined. They're lined. Both of them are lined. The last bustle gown that I made out of silk that was not lined was apparently the 2018 stripy pinkish bustle that I made. And otherwise, the 2 from 2019 are lined. And the Natural Form gown, gala gown, that was lined in what I'm pretty sure was organdy, but like a softer night. Well, it has since softened even more, but the weave looks like organdy. It no longer feels like organdy, but I think that's what it is. However, I only have my terrible papery organdy that was sent to me, even though it was like the wrong stuff. Don't worry, I did get refunded, but I only have that sort of organdy. So that will work for like 1830s. I don't think it'll work for this, to be honest. And then the other one, I was really surprised, and honestly, I'm still surprised. I have no idea why I decided to do this when I didn't think I had that much of that fabric, but my Fairy Godmother bustle, so the overskirt portion had to be lined with this pink, I'm pretty sure it was completely poly, but maybe silk blend, lightweight taffeta. And it had to be lined for the overskirt because it's turned back and you see it. And same with a lot of the bows, like they are partially pink and partially blue and you see all of that. But apparently I decided to line the entire skirt with it as well. I don't know why. So yeah, both of those are lined with 2 very, very different materials. And I'm just kind of feeling like this one wants to be lined too. I mean, the over drape part where it's like connected all the way to the front of the bodice, that's going to have to be lined unless I just leave the lining, which they did do. They would line it to the hip and then just like end that and not line the skirts sometimes. But I'm gonna line it because otherwise it's gonna look different, you know, above or below the hip. It's gonna look different. So I'm definitely gonna line that. But this is the underskirt that I'm working on right now, and I'm like, ah, wasn't planning to line this. So I think I'm gonna go around my sewing room, figure out if I have anything that I can line it with that would be a decent weight, but like not too heavy. I don't want it to bring it down. So, you know, you don't want to use just like a quilting cotton because that is going to weigh your skirt down. So you want something that has a little bit of that body, but like not too much body, like that papery organdy. I don't know what to do. And I know I don't have any cotton sateen. That could work. Well, I do still have some Supima cotton. This pink, I think you can see it right there on the shelf. That pink, that is Supima cotton that I've been hanging on to since Joann's did its crazy Supima cotton sale several years ago. And it's never been the right color for anything. It's just a kind of a weird mauvey pink for me. And I haven't figured out what to use it. Maybe that's gonna be my lining, because that is a lightweight cotton that is smooth, that has a little bit of body. So I'm gonna mull this over and might cut into that cotton with all of these pieces and flatline them all together. But I will let you know what I choose, but yeah, I'm leaning towards the lining. Okay, let's talk about this skirt. I know I probably should have talked about things while I was putting the skirt together, but I got distracted and didn't. So last I talked to you, I was debating about doing some sort of a flat lining to this skirt, and I was talking about potentially using this cotton sateen or maybe something else. As you might be able to guess by the fact that there is still a lot of this cotton sateen, I did not use this. For one thing, I really didn't want to because this is a dress length and I would love to make a full dress out of it, not just a lining. And for two, this actually has a lot more weight and a lot less body than I would want for the lining of this skirt. So I made the probably bad decision to just work with what I had, which was the papery cotton organdy. Yeah, I don't know if that was a good decision, but that's what it is. It's flatlined with the cotton organdy. Right now, I feel like it still looks very puffy, I guess is the right word. Puffier than I would want it to because it's giving it, honestly, too much body, but I'm hoping that once I add the decorations to this skirt, all of the ruffles and pleats and everything all along the hem, that will change a little bit. So right now, the skirt pieces, basically what I did was I flatlined each piece. I took the silk piece, laid it on top of the ironed out organdy, pinned it all in place, cut it out, and then I serged around each of those pieces, and then I sewed the skirt pieces together. There are pockets because, of course, you gotta have pockets. But the thing is that I decided to put the pockets on this underskirt, even though it's not fully accessible. Like I'm gonna have to lift up the overskirt a little bit to access these pockets, but the overskirt is pretty fitted. And I have had the problem before where like in a fitted skirt, you go to try to put side seam pockets in and the pocket gapes. And I did not want that to happen on this overskirt, especially because there's just so much going on with the way that it like loops back and sort of ties itself into that knot and everything. So I decided to go for the pockets here on the underskirt. They are right here in this side seam. And because I have pockets in the side seam, I decided to actually move the opening to the side back. So it's here, but it's on the other side. It's the right side because I prefer right side openings. I just find them easier to do than left side. And so it is here on this seam right here. Once I put everything together with the pockets and all, I also ran gathering stitches along the side backs and the back panels, and I've pulled those gathering stitches up. Now I believe I have pulled those gathering stitches up as tightly as they want to go. And I did want to do gathers and not pleats just because it seems like that was more common in this era, to be honest. But as you might notice by looking at this waistline, although I have pulled these up to what I believe is as tight as they can go, they are way big on this waistline. This pattern diagram that I used, which was pattern be in that one page that I showed you earlier in Patterns of Fashion, it does not call for any other shaping along these two front panels. It's just the gathering in the back. But I do find that in general, I tend to prefer a little bit of shaping, like pretty much like right here on the sort of as the front is going to the side, but before it reaches the seam. I tend to like a little dart right there, a little, I guess really not a dart, a little pleat right there, and sometimes a little pleat over here as well. So I am most likely going to do that. I will double check that I have pulled these up as tightly as they want to go. But also what you might be noticing right now is that this pocket is pretty far back. And I don't really want it super far back, you know, I want it a little closer to the side, maybe about right there. So that would mean that this is going to be shaped in right here with the pleats. So most likely I will put 2 pleats on each side, pretty small, less than 1 inch each pleat. And that should help it fit to the waistband, and then we'll be good. And that is the next step, is to put on the waistband. So for me, what I usually do with waistbands is I will do a 4-inch wide strip of fabric that is the length of my waist plus about like 5 inches or so, because I want it to overlap. I do things theatrically waistband wise, and so we get the 2 skirt hooks that are like on the edge of the waistband, and then we get a return hook right here. So it just really helps to hold those in place because the hooks are facing in opposite directions. It was something that I learned when working in the costume shop when I was in school, and I have just continued that through all of my historical waistbands, all of my waistbands in general, every modern day skirt and everything. I also do that for my waistbands. So that is my plan, is to cut like a 45-inch by 4-inch strip, and that winds up being a 1.5-inch waistband once you fold it and you take the seam allowances out. And that's kind of my go-to. I do plan to also flatline that waistband. I don't want to interface it because I hate modern interfacing. So most likely I'm going to use more of the organdy, even though it's kind of awful. And I'm going to flatline that organdy inside the waistband because it'll give me a nice, like, crisp waistband, sturdy, crisp waistband without giving me thickness. And that waistband just gets applied right sides together and then folded over, and the inside gets folded inside, and that gets stitched in the ditch. I've showed you waistbands a lot of times on this channel, so if you want to really go see in detail, I think the 3 cozy skirts video from the very beginning of 2021, I think that one goes into the most detail on waistbands, I want to say. I'll link that down below. But this is where we are at right now, so I'm going to go put on a waistband. Once I do that, I can mark my hem and sew my hem. Now, I did waffle about the hem a little bit because the hem is not going to be seen on this dress. It is going to be covered by a row of pleats all the way around. But I can't bring myself to do a machine sewn hem on a silk skirt for Victorian skirts. I can't do it. I have to do it by hand. There are some things you just have to do by hand, even though you know they're gonna take a really, really long time and never be seen, and this is one of them. So I will be doing that by hand. That will probably, once I mark that, that will probably be the end of this video because today is Sunday afternoon. So I am going to get to work on the waistband, and I will show you what that looks like when it's done. So change of plans, I was pulling up the gathering threads when they popped. So I've decided to go with pleats because I don't feel like redoing gathering threads. So I've got a bunch of small, they're like about 1 inch deep pleats, and then they overlap just slightly. So I think it comes out more to probably about 3/4 inch on the side, but I've got a series of those here. I'm going to put in one more in this section over here. I'm also going to tweak this a little just so it's more centered between the pocket. I was going to put one more here, but I don't think I will have enough. Her waist is pretty close to mine, but it's like a tiny skosh bigger. So that's why I'll have more room for at least one more pleat when I take this off, but I don't think I'll have room for 2. So I'll just move that one over to even it out, and we can pretend that the pocket is a pleat because I like doing that. I feel like a lot of times pockets do come off looking like pleats, and so it's fine to use them as such. But that's what we're going with now. We are going with pleats, so I'm going to pleat up the other side and then attach that to the waistband. So I'm starting on the hem for the skirt, and to do this I am creating a facing. Now this facing is out of my nice old organdy that I only had strips left of, so it's worked out quite well. But this is, honestly, I didn't even measure it. I think it's maybe about like 7 inches wide strip. I had looked in Patterns of Fashion and Costume and Detail, and about like a 6.5, 7.5 inch type facing seemed to be pretty normal. So I am creating this facing again just out of this organdy, and this is going to help protect the inside of the skirt both from the ground, because it does have a train, and then also just from your feet while you're walking. So what I've done is I have just gone and applied this skirt via machine, right side, well, not, there isn't a right side on this, but I mean, it would be right sides together. And I've just sewn that along 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now what I'm doing is I'm pressing it outward, so I get a nice clean press right here. I will also be pressing this side in by about 1/2 inch so that it gets a non-raw edge there, gets a nice finished edge. And then once that's all done, this will get pressed up to the inside of the skirt. And in the front, most likely I will actually have to like hem it to length. So there probably will be about a little bit of the silk pulled up like this in the front. In the back, my intention is to really have this, if I can do this one-handed, is to really have it like almost right on the edge, because that will protect the most of the hem. And the idea behind doing a facing like this is that if you do tear up the inside of your skirt, like with a train, you can replace the facing instead of replacing your skirt. So I have the skirt on, and the waistband is perfectly, like, it meets exactly where I want it to, so that's great. And then the hem in the back is already pinned up in place. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, but it is already pinned in place. The front I didn't pin in place because I wasn't sure about the length. I think what I'm going to try and do first is just pin the facing up the same way that I did in the back using the crease, because it does look like it almost might work. I am right now, although they are not buttoned up, I am wearing my American Duchess Renoir boots, since that is most likely what I will be wearing with this dress. And oh my god, I love them. I love these boots so much. But they have a pretty low heel, so I have to see what exactly the hem looks like in here. I am also wearing right now my trained petticoat. It is very hard to show you this, but I have shown you this in my undergarments video, so I'll link that video down below, but it has the optional train that's sewn on the back, so I do currently have the train attached. That will probably do a decent job of helping with the train, but honestly, I wish I had more petticoat, because I feel like this skirt right now it's so poofy because of the organdy. We'll see once I add the trim on it if it'll get any better, but I do so love the color. So I am working on the hem, trying to pin it into place, but it is not going at all as planned. Like I think it's the side seam where it meets. Yeah, the side seam has this deep of a fold over going on right now, and it is still not deep enough. And this was where I thought it would basically start to be no fold of the silk at all. So now it's also the thing of, do I let that happen? Do I redo my facing? Because the facing is there to protect the silk. And if the silk is being folded over like this, then obviously it's not getting protected. Now in the very back, it is still no fold over at all. It's just the facing. But the side like this, and I mean, you can also see probably that this is not at all doing the right thing here. But again, this has to be shortened by at least 1/2 inch more. Oh wait, not that one. This one has to be shortened by at least 1/2 inch more. So basically I'm getting just kind of a weird curve going on as I open it up, so that there is less of that facing, or less of the skirt actually folded over. And I'm a little bit nervous. I mean, this is the side, so it will not be dragging on the ground. It's probably okay to leave it as silk, but it's still not what I had intended. Like, I had intended the front has this much of a fold over. That's what I had intended for all the way around until we got to the back, where it had no fold over at all, or just the facing showing. But it just gets deeper and deeper until it hits the side seam, and then it gets narrower again. And that wasn't my plan, and I'm just having to do like a lot of the taking up. So if you are using this pattern B, I think it was, for a natural form, make sure you shorten them, because I went exactly to the scale of the pattern, just like increasing what my length needed for the front and for the back, which both were correct, but obviously the sides were not in this case. I also, honestly, like, I know my petticoat is not doing a good job right now. It, at the very least, needs starching. I feel like it's practically wrapping around me and doing nothing. I could probably use 1 or 2 additional whole other petticoats, to be honest. And then the other thing is that this organdy is not helping, because it is making the skirt like bunch up weirdly. I mean, my sewing room is small as it is, so it is pretty much impossible for me to flip the skirt out, see the train, and still stand in front of the mirror. That's just, it's not gonna happen, but the organdy is making it harder. So all of that said, I'm getting really frustrated right now, and I still have a couple of videos that I need to edit tonight, and it is now 9:00 p.m. So, not getting the hem done in this video like I thought I was going to. I know that it doesn't feel like or at least to me, it doesn't feel like I've actually done much this week, but here we are. So I'm ending the video here. Hopefully it was enjoyable to you. Anyway, I hate ending videos when I'm frustrated, but as you know, if you've been around my channel at all, this is what happens sometimes. Anyway, if you like this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Sharon, Julie, and Mirage. Thank you also to Skillshare again for sponsoring this video, and that link to your free Skillshare membership is down in the description. I hope you all have a wonderful week. I will be back next week with more of this project, hopefully finishing the skirt, putting all the trim on, etc. And I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!